So, part two of my family ancestry connecting to Scotland and MacDougall. Since the early 2000s, several genetic studies have been conducted on men bearing surnames traditionally associated with patron descendants of Somerled. The results of one such study published in 2004 revealed that 5 chiefs of Clan Donald, who all trace their descendant from Somerled, were indeed descended from a common ancestor. Further testing of men bearing the surnames McAllister, MacDonald, and MacDougall found that all from a sample group, 40% of McAllisters, 30% of MacDougalls, and 18% of MacDonalds share this genetic marker. These percentages suggest that Somerled may have almost 500,000 living descendants. The results of a later study published in 2011 revealed that a sample of 164 men bearing the surname MacDonald, 23% carrying the same marker borne by the clan chiefs. Now, I thought this picture was kind of interesting. You got a ship right there, Dunley Castle, with our animal, the raven. So, having a raven as a clan symbol, we have a pagan past that believed in Norse myth. The story goes that you needed to prove your lineage family history to Odin to become a king. Although that isn't his true name, he has hundreds. He was a real person, as I'm finding, but depending on your belief, animism, and everything, you can believe differently, but I'm finding that he's a real person. But Odin had 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin. So I started a DNA test to try and find out more. And there's my percentages right there. And here's the locations. And it says my ancestry is pinpointed right here. And it's like right in the middle of Norway and Sweden, right on the line. And I found this place called Raknehaugen, a famous grave, and it's right on the line, as you see. And I'll show you the video I found.
In Oslo, and there is a very, very special pagan sacred site there. A very, very special burial mound called the Raknehaugen. Like I said, it's not that easy to get to unless you have a car. So we're going to take that walk now and giving you some fun facts along the way, going to this very, very sacred and interesting burial site. So this is just a quick video, but arguably the most significant and mysterious burial of the whole Viking Age, with a lot of paranormal activity happening here over the years and lots of local legends. We have a damn long walk through some beautiful countryside. So about an hour walk from the Oslo airport, but I've been on a party binge the past month, so I could use a little activity.
I'm skipping this part because he goes through a lot of drinking.
Raknehaugen is located next to a small lake right at the crossroads of 2 very ancient trade routes, so we think probably it was the center of an ancient chiefdom here. The burial mound itself is dated to the migration period, so the mid-500s, quite a while before the Viking Age. We can tell the date pretty accurately, actually, due to the logs that were used to build this mound. Logs from 30,000 trees were used for this, and 97% of them have been shown to have been cut down in a single winter and then built the next summer. So you can just tell the massive manpower that must have gone into building this burial mound and how important the man was that was buried in here. We don't know exactly who the man was buried in here, but the archaeological finds from inside it tell us a bit more. There was a layer of coal with animal bones and a cremated human skull fragments from an individual between 20 and 35 years of age. They were found in the base of the mound, along with a few other very insignificant items, actually. That's incredibly few artifacts and finds considering the size and importance of this burial mound. If we compare it to the Gokstad or Oseberg mounds, for example, there were entire ships buried in these with hundreds and hundreds of artifacts. And we know actually pretty well who was buried in the Gokstad and Oseberg mounds, along with a lot of these other mounds in Scandinavia, but not this one. And this is actually one of the biggest. So who is buried here, and why is it called Raknehaugen? About halfway, maybe time for a fun fact. So it's called Raknehaugen or Raknehaugen, a couple of different ways of saying it. We are not sure exactly who was buried there.
There are a couple kings in the sources named Rakni, but there are definitely more kings in the sources named Ragnar, so we think that the original one who was buried there might have been called Ragnar.
So the only reason that some scholars have suggested that this was actually a King Ragnar buried here is that the name is similar, of course, but also the size of the mound reflects the importance of King Ragnar who might be buried in there. The problem is, the timeline just doesn't add up. The Ragnar you all know was from almost 300 years after the man in this burial mound. But scholars have agreed that all these tales we have about the great Ragnar, it was probably not just one person, but multiple people combined and made into a legendary figure, spread out over a long time span. But there's no way to even tell what this man's name was who is actually buried in here. The first evidence we have of the man's name comes from the 1700s, that late, where the local people say that it was a king named Ragnvold who was buried in there, who was another Norwegian king who again lived very long after this man in the burial mound, so it couldn't be him. Second legend comes from the early 1800s in a diary entry from one of the local farmers who said it was a king named Rakni who was buried there. And one night, 3 local women were walking by and were horrified to find a giant, dark-figured man who was the spirit of King Rakni, and he was angry that his mound was being dug into and built upon, as he should be. A grand burial and sacred space for hundreds of years has now not been treated very properly for a very long time. We have other local tales of supernatural experiences, but the first one actually dates to the Viking Age too. In Bailar Saga, the spirit of a dead king named Raknar comes to the court of Olav Tryggvason at Christmas time, and a man named Gester eventually destroys the spirit of this Raknar and his 500 warriors and send them back to their mound in the north in some kind of spiritual warfare type of thing. So we think that this could also be referring to this mound and whatever man or spirit was buried in it. Also, since there are quite a few other smaller burial mounds right in this area that were believed to be the warriors of whichever king is buried in the main one here. There are also local legends about spirits of men riding out on horses at the midwinter, one of the many tales around Europe that you will find relating to the famous wild hunt. But it still doesn't give us any clear indications of who Rakne was, and if it was even him who was buried in this mound.
I'm tired, and I've been traveling and walking thousands and thousands of steps a day for the past month now. Makes me really want to just rob someone who's riding by on a bike and take that.
I will say, however, about King Rakne, there are quite a few skaldic poems where a king named Rakne is mentioned. Not much information is given about him or his life. The only thing we really have are some incredibly powerful kennings or metaphors relating him to the sea. I mean, look at some of these. The sea is referred to here metaphorically as the roaring path of Rakni. Raknar's path, Stiga Rakna, and ships themselves are even referred to as the well-known steeds of Rakni. I mean, look at this, the way that Rakni is referred to in these skaldic poems, it's almost godlike. This is not exactly the kind of language that is typically used about regular kings of the time. Was Rakni more than a king? Was he some sort of sea god, mythological figure? We don't know. But I can tell you one thing, the size of this burial mound and incredible energy in this area absolutely reflects the importance of the Rakni that would have been referred to in the skaldic poem.
So due to the burial mound size and everything else, that he's saying that it would be someone of great status that was my ancestor due to that location.